So before we look at the Tosafos, and there's also Haggah, that was in Rashi that we left out yesterday. And before we're looking at some of the details in Rashi, we should first look at the Gemara in Bava Kama. The Gemara in Bava Kama is Daf Chafim with Beis. So you have the link there in the WhatsApp, or if you have a Shas, you can open up the Bava Kama to Daf Chafim with Beis. So there the Gemara quotes our Mishnah. They say the exact Mishnah in another context. And the Gemara has comments there on our Mishnah. And we might have to do some comparison between the two Gemaras. And Tosafos does that, and we'll see in other Mefarshim that do it as well. And we'll also look at the Rashi here and Rashi there, which will help us sharpen understanding of Rashi over here, because you'll see that Rashi here is, in some ways, different than the Rashi in Bava Kama. So the Gemara is Daf Chafim at Beis, and the Gemara is discussing it's the middle of the sugya of Zeh Nana v'Zeh Leichase, which means if I make use of something of yours without your permission, but you don't lose anything by me doing it. So do I have to pay for the usage or not? In other words, when I steal, so I've taken it away from you, you can't enjoy it anymore. Or when one steals, I shouldn't say I. Then you have to pay back because you've caused someone, any damage, not just theft, but you've caused somebody else a loss of monetary value, and you pay back the monetary value. Or I'm not paying necessarily for the loss of value. I'm paying for the fact that I have enjoyed of your property without your permission. And therefore, in a case where Zeh Nena, where one person enjoys, but Zeh Leichase, the other person didn't lose anything. So I enjoyed of his property without his permission, but he didn't lose anything by me enjoying it. So do I have to pay for that or not? This is the sugya discussed here in Bava Kama. Now, in that context, the Gemara raises our Mishnah and tries to use our Mishnah as a proof. So let's see. So you could see the word Tanan is on the last line of the page, and it's the last line on the last word on the line. I'm sorry, and it's 8 lines from the top. Tanan, and the next line is HaMakiv. It's our Mishnah, and you'll see the little aleph there, little base there. So Tanan, the Gemara now raises this Mishnah as a proof for this idea of Zeh Nena v'Zeh Leichase, for this din. How so? HaMakiv Chaveiro, one who encircles his friend, Misholosh Rechosav, on 3 sides. The Goder is Arishayna, and he put a fence on the first one. There's Ashniya in the second field. There's Ashlishis in the third field. Ein Mechayven Oisai, you don't oblige the guy in the middle to pay for his share on the outside. You don't oblige the guy in the middle to pay for his share of the fence that the guy on the outside built, because there's only 3 walls. But revius. But if the guy on the outside built the 4th wall, we do oblige him to pay. Right? The same inference that our Gemara made here. That revius mechayven. But in the context there, what does the Gemara conclude? Therefore, Shema Mino, so we can derive from here. Zen and if this guy enjoys and the other guy doesn't lose, chayev, he's obligated to pay. Right? Over here, the guy gaining is the guy in the middle. The guy in the middle is gaining by this extra fence. Now, the guy on the outside didn't lose anything because he would have built the fence for his own field anyway. And yet the guy in the middle has to pay, because he's making use of something that he's making use of somebody else's property, even though his making use of it doesn't make the other guy lose anything. And still he has to pay, because the other guy is building the 4 walls anyway for his own field. Yeah? So let's see Rashi. So, which, by the way, already you can see now that, like Adam, you raised this issue yesterday about whether the 4th side, like what's there? Is it a public property? Is it his private? Is it this guy's 4th field? So obviously the Gemara over there is learning that it's actually his 4th field. It's his 4th field on the other side. And let's talk to see in Rashi. Let's see how Rashi explains the Mishnah there. So Mishalish Rechosov says Rashi on the left. Shahoyla Ruven Shalish Sadis Eitzel Sadeh Shimon. He had 3 fields near the field of Shimon, Mishalish Rechosov on 3 sides. So you could already see a difference in Rashi. Remember, we pointed out from Rashi that Rashi in our Mishnah in Basra writes, Shakana Gimel Sadis. He bought 3 fields. And then Rashi continues, Shekana Gomel Sada Chavero, he bought 3 fields, and then he was magder each of the 3 fields, and Nimtza, the guy in the middle, is Mukaf. Nimtza, the result is the guy in the middle has his field surrounded on 3 sides. But here Rashi doesn't say the guy bought it. He has a field on 3 sides. Now, V'goder Ruven, and then Ruven went, continuing Rashi and Babakam. V'goder Ruven Eser Rishayna. That's already one difference we see in Rashi here. Whether he bought it, or he had all 3 already. It's a little diuk. Now, V'goder Ruven, so Ruven is this guy on the outside. He put a fence, Eser Rishayna, the first field. Samuch L'stei Shimon, which is right near the field of Shimon. Levad Mechitzonos. Levad Mechitzis Chitzonos. In addition to the fences he had on the other side of his field, which is between him and his other neighboring fields, whoever else the other people are that own the field in that open area. This is another thing Rashi doesn't mention in our Gemara. So Rashi over here saying that the guy is building a fence between his field and the middle guy, Shimon, and these fences are in addition to the fences he's already built on the other side of his field. Rashi makes no mention of those other fences in our Gemara. Rashi doesn't mention that. Even though L'chura, Rashi is talking about that, as we discussed yesterday, the way Rashi phrases it in Bava Basra is, the Gadar Sarishayna, he fenced in his own field. The Gadar Sashniya, and he fenced in his own second field. The Gadar Sashlish, and he fenced in his own third field. The Nimtza, the result is the guy in the middle is boxed in by 3 sides. And the language of Gadar Sarishayna sounds like he fenced the whole thing, as if to say, I'm doing it for myself anyway. So it's implied in Rashi and Bava Basra, but not explicit in Rashi. But in Bava Kama, Rashi does say explicitly that the fence he's making in the middle, in between him and the guy in the middle, is in addition to the fences he's already built between him and the more exterior fields on the outside. Another little diuk. Even though I don't think it's different in our Gemara, but it's still interesting that Rashi elucidates this. There might be a reason why. Obviously there's a reason, but perhaps something will come. Okay, and then he also fenced in the second and third, kazeh, like this. And Rashi puts a picture there, if you can see it, the picture in the Rashi. I mean, we're not learning Bava Kama, but Rashi could have just made this picture like in one Dibur Maschal, not like 2 Dibur Maschals. Like after the second and third, then he puts kazeh. And in our Gemara, it doesn't put a kazeh at all, doesn't put a picture at all. Like, it's not that difficult to understand. It's a diagram. Anyway, so our Gemara, our Mishnah said, because there's only 3 sides, you don't make him pay. And here Rashi says the same thing as our Gemara. You don't oblige Shimon to pay for anything at all. The Maya Hanile, because what gain does Shimon have? His field is still open on the 4th side. So he has no gain. Because he has no gain, no reason to make him pay. And then the Gemara inferred over there, Haravias, just like the Gemara inferred over here in Bava Basra, that the Patanakama stops short after the guy on the outside built 3 walls. But what if he built 4? Then, now here's the interesting thing Rashi adds. If Reuven had 4 fields surrounding Shimon, not that he bought a 4th field. It's almost like it's a new clause. The first case is we only had 3 fields, which is why I only made fences on 3 sides. And the inference the Gemara is making is that if he had a 4th field, he would have done the 4th wall also. Whereas in our Gemara, Rashi doesn't make any comment like that. Just the guy went and built the 4th fence for whatever purpose, without making mention of that he had 4 fields, and also not kana, that he bought a 4th field. But if a new case, if he had 4 fields, and then the Gidron, and then he fenced in all of his 4 fields, then we do oblige Shimon to pay as to pay for the cost of the inner field, the inner walls, as opposed to the outer walls. The inner walls, which is between his field and the other guy's field, as opposed to the outer walls between the other guy, between Reuven's field and the rest of the bika, the rest of the open field area. Which is between him and Reuven. So the Gemara therefore inferred that Zen Nena v'Zelei Chaser is Chayiv. So who's the Nena and who's the Chaser? Who's the Nena and who's the Loi Chaser? Zen Nena Shimon, on the inside, he gains by now having a fenced-in field. V'Zelei Chaser, and the guy on the outside doesn't lose anything. Ruvain Shayesh LaLigder Sadeu, because he anyways has to fence his field, and it just so happens to be by his fencing his own field, he's fencing Shimon's field. So this last line explains why Rashi over here says that he owns the fourth field, and why Rashi also adds that he's putting a fence on both sides of his field, because all that indicates that I'm not spending an extra dime because of Shimon. By making the point that Reuven anyways has those fields. Not that he went and bought. And because he bought and Shimon's in the way, he has to make bigger fences. And now he can blame Shimon for the fact that he's making that. So there is a chaser. In other words, Reuven is chaser because Shimon is there. Rashi is adding these details, l'chora, to make the point that Reuven is not chaser anything by making these walls. Because Yisai has these four fields. And he's anyways putting up walls on both sides. Right? Whereas in our Gemara, it's not important to say this din of Zen and of Zelei Chaser. And if it's not important in our Gemara to say that Reuven owns the fourth field, or that anybody owns the fourth field for that matter. Rashi makes no mention of that, neither does the Gemara. Because it's not negay in our Gemara. What's negay in our Gemara is, what's the diun in our Gemara, as opposed to the diun over here? The diun in our Gemara is, what's the din now? I mean, is our Gemara not discussing also Zen and Zelei Chaser? Is that not also our Gemara in Bava Basra? Or is our Gemara in Bava Basra coming after the Gemara about the din of building walls between fields? Right? Maybe when we see the Haggadah, we'll get some insight here. Is not our Gemara all about Zen and Zelei Chaser? All the different Ibois Emes yesterday. Now, what is the guy on the inside gaining? Is he gaining the amount of money for a cheapest wall, or is he gaining the amount of money for a whole wall? Or is he gaining the amount of money that he would have saved on a human scarecrow? Right, all that stuff. Is that not a question of what's the nene and Shimon's lechaser, or the ikr in our Gemara seems above Basra? Is does the guy in the middle have a legitimate hana? And if he has a legitimate hana, you got to pay for it. Or by demonstrating that he likes it because he built the fourth wall, he definitely has to pay for it. Right? So it's a question of, sorry?
That's also a legitimate hana. The question, seems to me, is it's almost taking for granted of that Zen and Zelei Chaser is a principle. It's a principle, yeah. So now, based on that principle, what does the hana consist of?
Right.
Do we go by Tanakama, who says it consists of automatically you're deemed to have hana when you're surrounded on four sides, or Rabbi Yesu, where it says no, you need to have actual hana, and we only know that if you're Megali your das by right. Putting up the.
So you're saying the Gemara in Bava Basra comes after the information we already know in the Gemara in Bava Kama.
Which makes sense, right?
Yeah, Bava Basra does come after Bava Basra.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so maybe. But we have no mention of that in Rashi, no mention of from it. Maybe a little bit in the Haggadah, we'll see, but in Rashi we don't have any mention. We just have discussion on what's the definition of the mikif's hana. That's what the Gemara's discussion here is.
Why is that a reason for him being chayiv in Bava Kama?
Oh, it's not a reason. The Gemara's bringing his raya. In other words, our Mishnah is a raya in Bava Kama that Zen and Zelei Chaser is chayiv. Because Tanakama says if the makif make a fourth wall, he has to pay. Even though the makif is not chaser. But because the nikif is nena, therefore he pays. So it's a raya. And then Adam is suggesting that this could be right. That our Gemara already understands that as a fact, as a conclusion. Now the question becomes, the Gemara is getting into what exactly is the definition of this hana that the nikif has, and to what, does he have to express his hana, or does it happen automatically or whatnot? That could be. You can accept that. Okay, so that's the Gemara. That's the Rashi. Let's go back to the Gemara now, in Bava Kama. The Gemara now continues. And the Gemara says that our Gemara is not a raya. Our mission is not a raya. Why is our mission not a raya? Shiny Hassam over there in Bava Basra, it's different. The reason why Shimon has to pay for Reuven's wall, even though L'chora Reuven is not chaser or anything, it's not because Zen and Avizel chaser chayiv, but because there actually is a chisaron. Reuven is chaser something. Why? The Omar le, because Reuven can tell him, At garamtali hakefi yaseda. You caused me to make an extra round circle, an extra fence. Also, how'd you make me build an extra fence? So says Rashi, if Reuven didn't have Shimon in the center of his fields, then he would have got away with just the outer wall. Another reason why Rashi has to say he built both walls. Because if Shimon wasn't there, and Reuven could absorb Shimon's field into his field, it would just be one massive square. And then he would only need one fence. And all my fields would be fenced into one fence. And therefore there is a chisaron to Reuven. Because now I'm building an extra 4 walls. All the walls around you are extra, thanks to you. Had you not been here, I wouldn't need that extra wall on the inside of my field, making my field O-shaped. It would just be a square. Okay. So our Gemara, our Mishnah could be a case where there is a chisaron to Reuven, to the guy on the outside. Now, does this hold up in according to all the explanations the Gemara gives in Bava Basra? In all the different scenarios we explained yesterday. Certainly, it would not work. Let's say the halacha is he has to pay for half. Okay, so Dmei Bizoil would work. It certainly wouldn't work if what he has to pay for is the amount of a human scarecrow. Because that's not what I'm making you lose. What Reuven's making Shimon lose is the cost of the fence. I'm sorry, what Shimon's making Reuven lose is the cost of the actual fence.
That depends on what the din is. The din is, could you pay the lesser of the advantage to the nana, or the cost to the chaser? And if the hana is just the value of a scarecrow, then you can't force me to pay more than my hana.
So that you were adding another variable, that the hana isn't necessarily commensurate to the chisaron. Okay. Let's see when we see Tosafos.
Are you a lawyer?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm learning the wrong way, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, the other ways of learning this Gemara, but we're going with Rashi's way at least. Okay, let's go right there in the Gemara and Baba Kama. Now the Gemara introduces the second half of our Mishnah. So now the Gemara tried to derive Zenin of Zela Chaser Chayev from the Tanakam of our Mishnah. Then the Gemara continues in Baba Basra, in Baba Kama, Tashma coming here, the second half of the same Mishnah in Baba Basra. Amar Rabbi Yossi said, oh my Nikif, if a Nikif got up, this is an extra word that the Gemara is adding into our Mishnah that doesn't exist in the gears of our Mishnah. We're going to see a discussion of that in Tosafos and the Haggah. But anyway, even though the maskana of the Gemara in our Gemara is that Rabbi Shimon talks about the Nikif, at least one of the maskanas are, right? Because the Gemara's assumption was the whole time that Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi are not arguing about who built the fourth wall. It makes a difference. So long as the Nikif, the guy in the middle, is enjoying it, he has to pay for it. Only the last answer says that Rabbi Yossi says only Nikif. The very last answer, and one version of the last answer. Where Rabbi Yossi is more makel and says only if the Nikif got up and said it. But anyway, the Gemara over here takes on that version, whatever reason. And the Gemara says, like the Gemara Baba comes with this. Amar Rabbi Yossi says, Nikif, if the guy on the inside got up, so Shimon, The God there said, he made the fourth wall. Then Megalgan of a Sakon, you make him pay for all four of them. Says the Gemara, inferring from this din of Rabbi, Taima, the reason why we make the Nikif pay for all four of them is the God on Nikif. Because he actually built that wall. HaMakif, but if the guy on the outside built the wall, Potter, he wouldn't pay for anything. Shmamina, then you can infer from here that Rabbi Yosef's opinion is, Zen nen of Zelech Chaser, if this guy gains, that guy doesn't lose. So this guy gained Shimon by having his field fenced in. Reuven didn't lose because he's building the walls anyway around his fence. And Rabbi Yosef's opinion, based on this reading of the Mishnah, Shimon is potter from paying anything because he didn't build the fourth wall. So Zen and Zelech Chaser potter. That's what the inference is from Rabbi Yosef's opinion. Says Rashi in Bava Kama, in Amad Mikif Goder Zeravius, Gali Adaite, he expressed his opinion that he's appreciative of the fencing. Shall Reuven, that Reuven built because he built the fourth wall. And therefore, then you make him pay for all of it. Losses is shall Reuven, to pay for the cost of the three inner walls of Reuven, not the outer ones. Even though one could argue, one could make the argument. Let me ask it this way: what's Shimon gaining by the walls around this field? What's he gaining? What's the noise getting? The noise getting is preventing trespassers, right? Or preventing animals wandering in and eating his crop. Now the outer wall would do the trick just as well. If there was no wall between his field and Reuven's field, what's the problem? Right? Which is why in the previous case, in the previous clause, Rashi says that the outer guy says to the inner person, you're making me build this extra wall. Because now I have to prevent you coming into my property. So unless the gain is, I guess, the reverse, that Shimon is not coming into his property, or Reuven is not coming into his property. Maybe. So it pays for all the three inner walls, okay. HaMakif. Now here, Rashi says the guy did buy another field. Not if he had four fields, but if he bought a fourth field. Before Rashi said, when the Gemara was analyzing the Tanakama. Now the Gemara is analyzing Rabbi, he says, if the guy on the outside bought the fourth field now, Potter Shimon is Potter. Don't know why. If I have an explanation for why Rashi here is medayik in saying kana, then maybe I would go to answer Baba Kama. But I'm not 100% sure why Rashi has to say that. It's kana, that he bought. Kana gimel sadis savav sadach haverei. Right. Unless, maybe, I'm just thinking this now, maybe before, let's just say they go with Kana in our Gemara. So Reuven bought fields around Shimon. So before Reuven bought those fields, Shimon had no wall, which means he didn't care about his neighbors. Right? So it further demonstrates Shimon's lack of concern for a wall. It's only this new pestering neighbor that makes me now need a wall. And it's all in the context of the Gemara in Basra, which is talking about putting up walls between neighbors. Like Rashi Taka says, why is it not mechuyev? Rashi doesn't say, by the way, interestingly, in our Gemara, in our Basra, Rashi does not say, when the Tanakama says, Ein mechayv v'noisei. So what does Rashi say? Los is klum, because we said before, the stam bika makom shlagol to ligdaru. That a stam bika, you don't have to build a fence. Rashi doesn't say the reason why it's not mechuyev is because it's loy chaser. Why is it not paying? Because loy chaser. You're not losing anything. You're building a wall anyway. Rashi doesn't say that. Or Rashi doesn't even say the reason why I'm not mechuyev is because I have a fourth side open and I have no hana yet. Which is what in Baba Kama the issue is. Rashi in Baba Basra says the reason why I'm not mechuyev is because I'm not mechuyev to build walls between neighbors. You, Shimon, Reuven decided to build a wall between me and you. Because you bought a field and you have an issue with neighbors looking into your property. So you built a wall. Your problem, not mine. Right? Which means, therefore, maybe the Hanom, Bava Basra, at least in Rashi, and we'll see soon from Haggah, might be even more clear. Or Lav Dafka. Anyways, we'll see. Yeah. The Hano that the person's gaining in the middle, that Shimon's gaining, is the fact that Reuven's not looking at him. It's not an issue of protecting trespassers. Maybe. But the truth is, it's a geder. It's not a wall. They're not bona koisel. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm pointing these things out. I'm really not sure.
Well, in Bava Kama, it just explains why he built only 3 walls first, and then there was no 4th wall, and then why he decided to build the makif, a 4th wall later.
Ah, right. Whereas in the Tanakama, what? So why the Tanakama can't be the same way? When the Gemara analyzes the Tanakama, why does it actually say Haravias, im hoyel l'Reuven? Why not im kana? Why not in kana? What would change? I don't know. Anyway. Last line, we're going to go down the Gemara. Sorry, what do you say?
That's not a diuk inside Bava Kama if he bought it or if he already had it. Yes, that's the difference between yeah, but when you're comparing to Mesetas, I understand that's okay.
No. Rashi changes it in Bava Kama. In Bava Kama, when Rashi analyzes the Tanakama, he says hoyoloi, and then when Rashi analyzes, when the Gemara analyzes Rabbi Yossi, Rashi says in Bava Kama kana. In Bava Kama, he makes the change.
In which word does he say kana?
In the Rashi Hamakif. The second Hamam.
Yeah, because.
But then the first but then the Rashi before Haravias, when the Gemara is analyzing Tanakama, Im Hoyel Reuven Dalet Sodas. Right, there's inference from the there's 2 inferences the Gemara Bava Kama makes. One from the Tanakama, that Tanakama stops short by 3, therefore Haravias Machai V'Noisai. And there Rashi says, how did the guy have a 4th field? Because Hoyoloi, a new clause. But when the Gemara makes inference from Rabbi Yossi, and the Gemara has the girsa apparently, at the Mishnah says Ha'amad Nikif, and the diuk is Nikif, not Makif. There Rashi comments and says Kana, that if he bought a 4th field and added it.
Yeah, that works well. That's what I understood when he bought it. If he bought the 4th field and it was the makif who did it, and therefore he's pater, etc.
Okay, so if Hoyoloi, would Rabbi Yossi agree with Tanakama?
If what?
If Hoyoloi, if he always had the 4th field, if he always had the 4 fields, would Rabbi Yossi agree that he doesn't have to pay? Well, I guess in that case, the Nikif wouldn't put it up. I'm not sure. I don't know.
It's smoother with he had 3, he put 3, then there was no 4th wall. He wasn't chayav or anything, Shimon. Then comes Rabbi, he buys the 4th field, he puts the 4th wall. So according to Rabbi Yossi, he's pater because he wasn't involved at all.
And the Tanakama, why not the same thing? I think Gemara analyzes the same thing in Tanakama. Why not? No, you're right. I think the kana is easier because it doesn't make it a new case. It makes it a continuation. But the interesting thing is in Bava Basra, he doesn't address who Bachal owns the 4th side. No mention of who owns the 4th wall in Bava Basra Bachal. And in Bava Kama, it's negeya to know that that Reuven owns the 4th field, because that will explain why Zen and Chaser. Why am I not chaser? Because I need a wall for my field. Well, I have to have a field there. In Bava Basra, no mention of who owns the fourth wall, which further indicates to me that the Gemara in our Gemara is not concerned with the issue of Zenon of Zela Chaser. The Gemara in Bava Basra is concerned with the issue of, do neighbors have to have walls between each other? And if they have to, then they have to split the cost. And if they don't have to, but they clearly both enjoy the wall, then they also both have to. Not midin zenen of zela chaser, but midin shutfin shecholku. Because there's no mention in our Gemara of who owns the fourth field, not in Rashi, not in the Gemara. Unless like Adam saying it's coming after already the premise of zenen of zela chaser, and we know already the fourth guy was the fourth field. Maybe. Although there's no mention of it in Rashi or the Gemara about who's on the fourth side. Let's see. We're going to see other Mefarshim, and we'll come back and see if I can find that in Rashi. Okay, let's just conclude the Gemara in Bava Kama.
Well, that explains here. That explains here why he is not chaser to he's not causing any chisarin to Reuven. No one forced Reuven to go buy that fourth field. I didn't make it go buy that fourth field. He wanted to buy a fourth field. Isn't there hate? And you put up your wall. And
that you explain that explains the Gemara in Bava Kama.
Yeah.
Yes, very much. Yes. Yes.
It explains the
change in Bava Kama.
Zen never zel chaser.
Yes. But in our Gemara, why kana? I think kana because now it became an issue of us being neighbors. In other words, if it's an issue of Zenon and Zela Chaser, it's very possible that for 40 years we never had a wall between each other, and you put a wall up. Because now I don't have to pay for a scarecrow. I don't have to worry about farm animals waltzing into my farm. So even if for 30 years we went without a wall between us, if you put one up, the issue of Zenon and Zela Chaser becomes into play, which is why Rashi could say Hayaloi. He had fields there, even for 20 years. But in our Gemara, you can't say that, because if for 20 years we were neighbors and we never had a wall, then clearly we don't care about seeing each other. And no matter what, you can't force me to pay for it, even if you put 4 walls up.
Isn't in our Gemara, isn't that already from the previous Mishnah that we don't put up walls in a bika?
Oh, and then for the new Mishnah is coming to Machadesh, that even though in a bika you're not mechuyev, if both of you clearly enjoy it, then you are mechuyev. And how do we prove both of you are clearly enjoying it? Either because of the fourth wall, or because you're megaladas by building the wall. Which is why Rashi in our Gemara says kana. Because if for 30 years we didn't have a wall between us, you can't now come along and make me pay. Certainly not. But if you bought the fields, and now you became my neighbor, and the day one you put it up, it's clear that from day one we're enjoying not seeing each other. We're enjoying our privacy. And then the issue comes in, do I have to pay or not? And can we qualify my enjoyment? Which would then mean that, one second, let's just see this. Let's see. Right, this explains why Rashi in our Gemara and Basra does not say why ein mechayev and not because I have a fourth wall open in which my animals are walking in and out. What does Rashi say? Because it's makam shenagu shelo ligder. Nothing to do with the lack of fourth wall. It's because makam shenagu shelo ligder. That's why.
The one issue with this may be that if it's about seeing each other, then before the makif owns the fourth side, still both benefited on the 3 sides.
So let's see Rashi Taka. Rashi in Bava Basra. Good point. So Rashi now says, look at the Rashi of Godos Shana. Right? And this is the Gemara inferring that if you built the fourth, then yes, mechayev and iser, right? What does Rashi say? He hasn't had any enjoyment. Why? Because the fourth side is open. I don't have privacy. The point is the one privacy.
Where is this?
Rashi in Bava Basra in the Gemara, 3 lines down from the wider set of lines in Rashi. This is the Gemara in our Gemara making the inference in the Tanakama. Tanakama stops short at 3. But if the fourth wall goes up, you do have to pay. So what does Rashi say? What's ein mechayev and oisai? Right, the second time Rashi is explaining ein mechayev and oisai. First Rashi explains ein mechayev and oisai in the Mishnah by saying because now Rashi explains, what is it that stops short of 3 and 1? Well, if it's a question of makom shnei shel ligdar, why not when there's 4 I should also not have to pay? So explains Rashi, because when there's 3, it's still open. I don't have the benefit of privacy yet. But once I do have the benefit of privacy, see, Rashi doesn't mention anything about animals waltzing in. It doesn't say anything. It just says it's open.
What, not just that, it's very medayik if you want to use the term galui as he's exposed.
Yeah. So I don't have the enjoyment of privacy yet. And once I do have the enjoyment of privacy, and this is a big chiddush din, if I'm correct, and that means that Rashi is saying the Mishnah is coming to add a new din, even in the case of a bika where there's no minig, and therefore it's as if there's no minig, and if you don't have to, but if you end up enjoying it, you have to pay. It's a massive chiddush din, but I think it's medulik in Rashi. I think it's medulik in Rashi. And my main reason, my main diuk is the kon and all that stuff is added. My main diuk is from the Rashi in the Mishnah, ein mechayev noisei, the second Rashi in the Mishnah. Why ein mechayev noisei? Not because the fourth wall is open and animals can waltz in, but because law says klum. Why? Because which means when the fourth wall goes up, why am I mechayev? Because you're mechayev to have walls between neighbors. I could be completely off. I think that Rashi is my main reason for coming to this conclusion.
That is because is not Shaligdor. That one?
Sorry?
Which Rashi?
The second Rashi in the Mishnah, in Basra. Second Rashi in the Mishnah, in mechayev noisei.
Right. And here that he says Shekana, why is the problem if he already had the fields?
Oh, because if I already had the fields, and for so many years we didn't have a wall, then it demonstrates the fact that I don't care for privacy. And we don't care for privacy. And if you can't all of a sudden make me have it. But if beforehand I was private anyway because I had no neighbors, and now all of a sudden I have a neighbor, now I'm worried about privacy. Maybe. Because a new guy showed up.
But the fields were owned, he bought the fields from somebody. He was kind of from someone. It wasn't it wasn't Hefker, and he was...
Okay, so that neighbor I didn't mind seeing him, and this neighbor I do mind seeing. He's more nosy, if I don't know. I'm saying there's a change, there's a new relationship now is the point. Rashi is demonstrating there's a new relationship between the neighbors, because kana. Whereas in Baba Kama, it's an old relationship. Hayu. They had fields. But in Rashi, in the Gemara here, it's a new relationship, because kana. The big problem here is that the only problem is that one of the Gemara's answers in Basra is that one of the Gemara's answers in Rabbi's opinion, how do you make a differentiation between Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi, is they saying that the guy pays for a human scarecrow. What does a human scarecrow have to do with privacy?
Mm-hmm.
That's my thorn here. What does a human scarecrow have to do with privacy? Nothing to do. This is what Rashi teaches. Unless, and this is mamash a stretch, I said yesterday the reason why Rashi is medayik, the kamaiseha, because that's the only time there's a threat because of animals, and therefore you have to have a human scarecrow, making it a very small price. Unless the only reason why it says kamaiseha is because it goes back to the Gemara on Daf Beis and Beis, where there the Gemara says
about looking at your crops.
Oh, yeah. And when the crops are up, then there's ayin hara, and that's when I want my privacy. Yeah. Unless that's why Rashi's saying that I need a human scarecrow to make sure there's no ayin hara coming on my field when my crops are there. It's a shtickle. It's admittedly a stretch.
It's a stretch because it doesn't really.
It's a stretch.
It wouldn't stop someone from seeing.
Yeah. Where's the Gemara? I want to see if it actually says here. Right, it's usher for someone to stand there because it's going to cause ayin hara. So maybe that's what this guy does. This guy goes to people and says, "Look, you're not allowed to be here. It's halacha. You got to leave." I mean, that's the only. It's a stretch. It's admittedly a stretch, but nonetheless, as we're going to see in the Haggadah, where he argues with Rashi, I think it makes my point stronger. So let's just conclude the Gemara in Bava Kama. Okay, so the last thing we learned in the Gemara in Bava Kama is that the Gemara is saying, based on Rabbi Yossi, because at least in Gemara Bava Kama, Rabbi Yossi is only talking about when the guy in the middle built the fourth wall, and that's why you make him pay. But if the guy on the outside built it, you don't pay. So Shema Mino Zeden V'Zelechaser Potter, right? Because if the guy on the outside built the fourth wall, he lost nothing because he's building that wall anyway. The guy on the inside gains, and he still doesn't pay. So he says the Gemara, Shiny Hasam, over there it's different. Because there is a loss. Why? Because the Amar Le, the Disagle Benetira Bazuza, I would be happy with a cheaper wall. And therefore, the guy on the inside says, the reason why I'm not paying is because I would have been okay with a smaller field, with a cheaper wall. You built a more expensive one, that's not my problem. And therefore you're giving yourself more hana than is necessary for my chisaron, if you will. Okay, that's the Gemara there. Like Rashi says, I didn't have the ability to build this whole fancy wall. I couldn't afford it. It would be enough for me to have just a cheap spikes between me and you.
So that's why he's putter, because it's not.
I'm putter because that's right. I'm putter because it's not really what I'm being nana from. Your chisaron is much greater than my nana, if you will, right? Or you chose to be more chaser than necessary, right? So it's not mamish then and v'zeh chaser because the guy who is loy chaser was actually extending more than necessary. Okay, so this ends the Gemara Bava Kama and its analysis of our Mishnah. And now let's look at Haggah and then the Tosafos. And then maybe next week we'll look at some of the other Mefarshim. And then after that we'll go to the sugya of Runya and Ravina, and it's the long Rashi we left out yesterday, and Tosafos which deals with that Rashi as well. Okay, so let's look at the Haggah now. So again, the Haggah, according to the Marsha, goes all the way from the words Haggah in the Mishnah, all the way till the Rashi Megalgalan, which means, in the Marsha's opinion, there's only 3 Rashis on the Mishnah: Hamkief, Ein Mechavin, and Megalgalan. And the rest in the middle is Haggah. So let's see the Haggah. Talmidoi Marenu Shmuel, which is the Rashbam. So he writes, unlike Rashi, which said, the reason why you're not paying for the walls between you and your neighbor's three fields is not because it's a stam bika, because I still don't have any enjoyment. So Rashbam is taking the side of Bava Kama and saying Rashi's not right. Rashi's incorrect to say that the reason why I'm not paying for the wall between me and the 3 fields near me is because it's a bika, I don't have to build any wall. The reason why I'm not paying is because of what the Gemara Bava Kama said, because I still didn't have any enjoyment yet. It's not because I'm exposed, but because people can actually walk in from the 4th side. But if you built the 4th wall, you do oblige him to build the minute Gemara, as the Gemara says. Even though our Mishnah said that between one field and another, the minig is not to build a wall. So why all of a sudden, because I'm enjoying 4 walls, do I have to pay? We don't have to pay anymore. This is the big kasha in our Gemara, and how the Gemara ignores this. Our Gemara just earlier said, the Gemara Basra concluded, a bika does not aim by between sadis and a bika. And now all of a sudden, the Gemara is inferring, what's the word? Unilaterally, inferring that if there's a 4th wall, you pay because you're enjoying. What? Didn't you just finish saying in the previous Mishnah that a stam bika, we don't build a wall? So why all of a sudden am I paying now? So says the Haggah, the Rashbam, Hani Mili, this is a Chiddush Din, this is not clear. Hani Mili, when do we say that a bika, stam bika doesn't have to build a wall? is bein bika lebika, between one bika and another bika. Bika is a valley, literally, which is basically a cluster of fields. So between one cluster of fields and another cluster of fields, then you don't have to build a wall. But between one field and another, if you're both enjoying it, yes, you do have to build a wall. So either way, there's a chiddush din from this Mishnah to the previous Mishnah, in that sometimes by bika you do have to build a wall. But why? So in Bava's view, it's clearly for reasons of Baba Kama, because nena. And when are you nena? When you have all four. The din before that in a bika you don't build a wall. That's between one bika and the next. And number two, the reason why. I'm sorry, when the Mishnah said you don't have to build a wall, it means you don't have to build a wall of 4 amas high. My timer, the lake has hezek, because a bika doesn't have hezek. And therefore, no reason for a 4 amas high tall wall. But to prevent a behemoth waltzing back and forth between animals. It shouldn't enter into the field. You have to build a 10 tvachim high fence to prevent behemoths coming in. And if once the 4th fence comes up, and now I have an enclosure protected from animals, I have to pay. Now, this makes me believe further that I'm correct in my reading of Rashi. Because Rashi chose not to go this way. Rashi chose to say, no, the reason why I'm potter for the 3 is because the Gemara earlier said by bika you don't have to pay. Which means when the Gemara comes along and says you are mechuyev to pay if the 4th wall is up, it's vaita because of the din of the Mishnah before. And then Bava is saying, not true, because a bika never needs a wall. Number 1, a bika never needs a wall. And number 2, rephrase that. In a bika, there's no issue of hezek re'iyah. And because there's no issue of hezek re'iyah, it's a separate din to the din of the preceding Mishnah. It's unrelated. The preceding Mishnah is talking about privacy, and this Mishnah is talking about animals waltzing back and forth. But in Rashi, because Rashi never introduced this idea of animals waltzing back and forth, why should I assume the Gemara is pivoting from what I talked about before, the issue of privacy? Where did that pivot come in? We've been talking about privacy all the time. We never were told that we're changing conversation now and talking about animals waltzing. The Rashbam tells us we're changing conversation. Fine, because he's telling us about Bava Kama. But Rashi never told us to pivot. So why not stay on course? We're talking about privacy. Especially since he clearly says we're hearkening back to the previous Mishnah. Okay, weiter in the Haggah. The Haggah says, Rabbi Yossi Omar, even though the Gemara over there does say, just give me 1 second, I just have to get a Kleenex. Sorry, so even though the Gemara in Bava Kama adds the word nikif, here the Gemara, the nikif doesn't belong. The same thing Rabbi Chananel says, but the Gemara will conclude later that we're talking that in Rabbi Yossi, the person who built the 4th wall is the nikif. That's the Gemara's last answer, the Yiboy Seim at the end. Until the Yiboy Seim, the Gemara assumes no matter who built it, the same thing applies. Whereas at the end, the Gemara concludes that's only the nikif. And Tosafos adds, as we're going to see in a moment, the Perek based Bava Kama, and the same thing is clear in the Gemara Bava Kama, where it's talking about the nikif, right? That's what we learned at the Gemara Bava Kama. Then the Rashbam continues. The language of the Mishnah actually implies that it's the nikif that built the 4th wall, right? Because the katani, because we learned im omad, if the guy got up and built the 4th wall. But like katani im gadar, it doesn't say, and if he fenced in the 4th side. Mechlal, the implication is because if we were talking about the same guy about the first 3, we just say, and if he did the 4th fence, as opposed to saying if he got up and built the 4th fence, as if there's a new initiative here, and therefore the language itself implies we're talking about the nikif. Okay. I think there are more דיוקים in Rashi that are understood based on this mahalach, if this mahalach is correct. And Lamashal, I'm going to show you the Rashi we pointed out yesterday. So I don't have a lot of time. I'll show you one more Rashi here. So look at the Rashi Tanakam Masavar. The second to last Rashi on the page. Now this is in the Iboyes Ema, that the Tanakama says that you only build that when the Tanakama when we infer from the Tanakama that if a fourth wall goes up, you pay. Right? The Tanakama stops short at 3. He says if you build 3 walls, no paying, which means if you build a fourth, you do pay. One of the Gemara's answers was that you only paid for half of the fourth wall, whereas Rabbi Yossi says you pay for all 4. What's the reason that you only pay for the fourth wall? Why not pay for the last 3? So it says Rashi. Tanakama says that you give the cost of half of the fourth wall. In Godra Makif, if the guy on the outside built it. But the first 3, you don't give him. Because you've already left the court victorious, that you don't have to pay for it anymore. Shahayusham Yamim Rabim. And it was there for a long time. And they were of no use to him because he still didn't have his privacy, if I'm right. And therefore, I only have to pay for the last fourth wall because now I'm finally having my full privacy. Now, if you look in Tosafos, Shniya b'shlishis loy. How does Tosafos explain why he doesn't pay for the second and third wall, or the first, second, and third wall? He says that this is the reason. The ein loch adam, there's not a person that wouldn't help in building a fourth wall, so that he should have 4 sides. In other words, Tosafos is of the opinion that the reason why you're paying for the fourth wall is because we know for sure that there isn't a person in the world that isn't happy with the fourth wall. If it's going to mean, in other words, if it's a question of I have no walls and now put them all up, I might say I don't care for it that much. But if I have 3 and all I have to do is put a fourth, everybody would want that, and if we make him pay for that fourth wall. Different explanation than Rashi. Now, Bekunter's Pirish in Rashi explains because he already left Bezdin. They have already determined by law that he doesn't have to pay, and therefore we don't retroactively undo the law we did before.
Nobody would not be willing to pay for the fourth.
Sorry?
That's what Tosafos is saying, that
anyone
would be.
Yes.
Right.
Everybody is happy when you have 3 and then you get a fourth. Whereas Rashi is saying that you don't pay for the first 3 because you've already, in other words, maybe you would pay, but because you came out in Bezdin, Zakai, we're not going to make you pay for it. Even though Ba'atzim you're enjoying all those 3 walls. Right? So now it says the Haggah, the Ksas Kosher, Rashi's taich is problematic. If so, Gam B'Revius, even in the fourth wall, Yotza Zakai, he's victorious, he's by law exempt, ad tefach acharin, until the very last tefach. Why? Because if I got to 3.5 walls, would I have to pay? Would I have to pay for the 3.5 walls? No, I wouldn't have to pay. Why wouldn't I have to pay? Well, because if the reason why I'm enjoying myself is because you're preventing animals from coming in, well, until you prevented all animals from coming in from all sides, I don't have to pay anything. So if that's the case, as the guy's physically building the wall, I don't have to pay for that because you didn't make me gain yet. So until you get to the last tefach, now all of a sudden I'm gaining. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a half a tefach. So, but all of this holds true. All this holds true if your issue is animals coming in. But if the issue is privacy, then there is reason to be in discussion. Well, one wall is more private than no walls. And therefore, the halacha says, no, 1 second. You gained, But because it's a bika, and by bika there's no halacha that you have to have a wall between the two, we're not going to make mechayev you. Only when you have 110%, only when you have 110%, then we say you're going to give it to you. Plus, moreover, Rashi adds the words yomim rabim. Why yomim rabim? Who cares if it's not the next day? If yotzim zaka bezdin, shahayu sham, period. Bezdin, period. What's yomim rabim? What's about yomim rabim? What's a lot of days to do with anything? What does it do with anything? The point is, I think, that you've been enjoying of this partial privacy, and yet you still don't have to pay because it's a stam bika, and stam bika doesn't get walls. Unless you come to the point where you have 110% privacy, now we can't deny the fact that you're enjoying it, and therefore we have to make you pay for part of it. But when you have yomim, sorry? What do you say?
Okay, continue. I can say.
Yeah. So because the Haggah is asking about tefach achrin. Why not tefach achrin? But tefach achrin isn't yomim rabim. You're still building. Rashi is saying it's zakeh bezdin and yomim rabim. Or another way of putting it is, even if you didn't actually go to court, but you're zakeh bezdin by dint of the fact that it's been yomim rabim. It's been yomim rabim, but you did not enjoy privacy of those walls, or at least not complete privacy, and therefore you don't have to pay because it's stam bika. Why would the fourth wall going up make you now pay for a wall that is your potter from paying because it's stam bika? In other words, like this: if our Mishnah is machadish, that even though a bika, there's no such thing as hezekriya and a bika, and therefore no reason, no chiyur for a wall. But our Mishnah is mechadish that if it's undeniable and undisputable that you have enjoyment because you have four walls, so chiddush din, you do have to pay for that. Comes Tanakama and says, we're limiting the scope of that chiddush din. That chiddush din only applies when you have full enjoyment. But if it's been established that you're not enjoying the full privacy because it's been a long time and you did not have a fourth wall, then we assign the law of stam bika to those three walls. And only now, when you have the fourth, now you're having full hana of your full privacy, and now it's undeniable that you're enjoying it, and we make you pay for some of it. Ulay yesh leimar. Kaponim, I think there's more דיוקים to be pointed in Rashi here, but maybe we'll leave that for tomorrow, another time.
The last tefach.
Next week, I'm sorry. Yeah?
Couldn't the last tefach also be the last tefach in height?
Last tefach and height.
Until, I have no hana until it's fully built in the blocks until the height required.
No privacy. I have no privacy.
Privacy or behemoths.
Behemoths jumping over, I guess, okay, 10 tefachim, either 10 tefachim or to 4 amas.
Something, if it's only 9 tefachim, I need that 10 tefach to complete.
Yeah. So, okay, so then, well, the Haggah, the Pashtos is learning consistent with the Haggah on the other side. If it's the same Haggah, I don't know. But let's just say it's the same Haggah, and they start learning that the issue is animals waltzing in. So you'd be right. It's the last tefach and height, let's say. But Rashi is saying this is of no concern to me, because the issue is not animals coming in. And there's no yomim rabim here. The issue is, what halacha do we ascribe to these walls under the scope of hezekriya? And because it's been a long time standing here, we ascribe it the law of bika. And the law of bika is you don't pay.
Right, so but even if it's because of hezekriya, and I do pay, and when I get the last wall with the last tefach, isn't that again to block eyesight when I get that final height, the final tefach here?
There's no yomim rabim. Which din? Okay, let's play that out. The guy built a 2 amas high wall instead of a 4 amas high wall, and let's say there is yomim rabim. It's been a long time. You left a 2 amas high wall. Do I pay for half that 2 amas? Right? Obviously not. Right? And then, why not? Why am I not paying for it? It's not even a wall. Even for a stam bika, it's not a wall. It's nothing. It's just cement you piled up. And then let's say 5 years later, yomim rabim, whatever the qualification of yomim rabim is, I add the other 2 amas. So what would Rashi say? Do you pay for half of those last 2 amas, or do you pay for half of the whole thing? I would say you pay for half of the whole thing. Why? Because now it became a wall of which we can classify it. Is it a proper wall for a bikkur or not a proper wall for a bikkur? And considering it's a 4th wall, it's classified as a proper wall for a bikkur that you have to pay for. That's what I would say. It's a question of, right? I'm learning here that the Mishnah is trying to say that even though the klal is by bikkur, you don't have to have a wall because there's no such thing as privacy. At some point, there is such a thing as privacy in the bikkur. And the question is, at what point is there such a thing as privacy? Answer, when there's 4 walls. But if you have 3 walls without the classification of this exception, then we put those 3 walls back into the original rule. And stam bikkur, you don't pay. And when a 4th wall comes, now we've gone to the new gather. Let me ask you a different way. If this Dik Nashi of Yom and Rabbim is correct, let's say the makif built all 4 walls in one day. What does he pay for? What does he pay for? In Tosafos, he only pays for the 4th wall. Because it's only at that point that we say everybody would be interested in pitching in. But in Nashi's view, none of these walls ever had a chance to be classified as stam bikkur wall of which you're put there. Because it right away came to all 4 walls at once. Because no Yom.
But it's Tosafos is the one who says, I have a problem that Rashi is difficult to learn because there's no benefit until the last tefach.
Right, which is why Tosafos rejects the whole idea of saying that walls get classification later in time. He says, forget it. There's a gather of 4th wall, because when there's 3 walls, a 4th wall is what a person is interested in paying for. A person is not interested in paying for 3 walls. So even if the guy put all 4 walls up at once, Tosafos is saying, we are of the opinion that people are only interested in paying for the 4th, even if they all happen to come at once. Whereas you, Rashi, for some reason, are differentiated by when they arrived. And that's what Tosafos is asking. Why? If you're differentiating by when they arrived, then wait till the very last second. And I'm answering that maybe the reason is because we have to look at the classification of what this wall is. Is it part of the exception to the rule of bikkur, or is it part of the rule of bikkur? If you're not fully enclosed, it's part of the rule of bikkur. If you're fully enclosed, it's now part of the exception of bikkur. And if it all went up at once, you're not going to pay for the whole thing, half the whole thing, because all 4 of them at the same time emerged as part of this exception to the rule where you're mechuyev to pay for a bikkur wall. Maybe. Is somewhat clear?
The last part we'll have to work on, I guess, next time. Yom and Rabbim.
Yeah, exactly what Yom and Rabbim is doesn't say. How long is it? Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a day? A year? It's not finished. But clearly, there's a certain point in which the walls change classification.
Right.
Right. And if it's a question of animals coming in, well, the classification is defined by can animals come in or can they not come in? But because it's a question of Hezekar, I think the different classification is, do you classify it as a regular bikkur wall, which we said in the previous mission, you're not mechuyev to build? Or is it part of this new exception to the rule, where when you have a full enclosure, you do have to pay? And that's what the Zakai the Bezdin will be. The Yom and Rabbim will make it classified either as part of the exception to the rule, if you have to pay, or as a part of the actual rule, and if you don't have to pay. I think. Okay, we'll continue Mr. Shem on Wednesday. I think there's more דיוקים to be said about this. And maybe next week we'll go straight to looking at other Mefarshim and come back to see if we can read more Nashi based on what we learned from the other Mefarshim. We shared the Yosef, the Rashba, and the Ben Yonis in there.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Night.
Good night, good Shabbos.